How did you get in here?" David Sterling's voice cut through the early morning silence of his executive suite, his hand already reaching for the security buzzer beneath his desk. The girl at his computer didn't flinch. Her fingers kept flying across the keyboard, eyes locked on the screen displaying financial records that should have been encrypted, protected, impossible for anyone to access without executive clearance. "Press it if you want, Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice steady despite being caught red-handed. "But you'll never find out who's stealing millions from your company." David's hand froze inches from the button. The girl finally turned to face him, and he saw she couldn't be more than 13 or 14 years old. Dark eyes met his with an unsettling combination of fear and determination. "You have exactly 10 seconds to explain yourself before I have you arrested," David said, his jaw tight. "I'm Emma Martinez. You fired my dad 6 months ago." She stood up, slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. "Carlos Martinez, your cybersecurity specialist. He tried to save this company, and you destroyed him for it." The name triggered a vague memory. David recalled signing a termination approval, something about a security breach. But the details were fuzzy. He'd been traveling so much, delegating so much. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but breaking into my office is the only way anyone would listen," Emma interrupted, desperation creeping into her voice. "My dad reported fraud 7 months ago. Your HR director buried it. 2 weeks later, he was fired on false charges. Now my mom can't afford her medication, we're about to lose our apartment, and the man who's actually stealing from you is about to present fake numbers to your board tomorrow." David's eyes narrowed. "That's a serious accusation." "I have proof. 5 minutes, Mr. Sterling. That's all I'm asking." Emma's voice cracked slightly. 5 minutes to show you the truth, or press that button and stay blind." Something in her eyes, that raw, desperate courage, made David pause. He'd built Sterling Digital Systems from nothing 20 years ago, back when he still believed in something more than profit margins and quarterly reports. When had he stopped looking his employees in the eye? When had he become the kind of CEO who signed termination papers without asking questions? 5 minutes, he said finally, moving to stand beside her at the computer. "But I'm watching every keystroke." Emma's fingers flew across the keyboard with practiced precision. Summit Tech Solutions, Pacific Coast Consulting, Cascade Systems Group. Recognize these vendor names? David scanned the payment records appearing on screen. "They're approved contractors. We use them for various services." "No, you don't." Emma pulled up incorporation records. Summit Tech's address is an abandoned warehouse in Georgetown. Pacific Coast is using a tax ID from a company that dissolved 3 years ago. Cascade doesn't exist in any state business registry. Welcome to True Spark Stories. While you're here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. You know, sometimes life has a funny way of testing us right when we think we've hit rock bottom. David leaned closer, his pulse quickening. The payments were substantial. $2.3 million over 18 months. These were all approved by. He trailed off, seeing the digital signature on every authorization form. "Richard Walsh," Emma finished, "your chief financial officer." "That's impossible. Richard's been with me for 12 years. He's stealing from you systematically while you weren't paying attention." Emma opened another file. The payments started small. 5,000 here, 10,000 there. But look at the pattern. They only happen when you're traveling, when you're delegating financial oversight. David's stomach twisted as he cross-referenced the dates with his calendar. She was right. Every payment coincided with his trips to conferences, investor meetings, his month-long absence when his mother was dying last year. My dad discovered the first irregularity 9 months ago. Emma continued, her voice softening. He was doing a routine security audit, found some weird vendor invoices that didn't match up with actual service logs. He did what he was supposed to do. He reported it to his supervisor, then to HR. And? David asked, though he was beginning to dread the answer. And Diane Carter, your HR director, told him she'd investigate discreetly. She promised him protection. Emma pulled up a series of emails. What she actually did was alert Walsh immediately. These are from my dad's backup files. Watch. The emails painted a damning picture. Carlos Martinez's initial report, time-stamped and detailed. Diane Carter's response, professional, concerned, promising action. Then, buried in the metadata, Emma had somehow extracted a forwarded copy to Richard Walsh with a subject line that made David's blood run cold. We have a problem. Within 48 hours, they fabricated evidence against my dad, Emma said, her voice shaking now. Planted logs showing he'd accessed confidential files without authorization. Created a paper trail of supposed security violations. And you signed his termination without even meeting with him. David felt like he'd been punched in the gut. I was told it was a standard security breach. Diane presented me with documentation. All fake. Emma wiped her eyes quickly, trying to maintain composure. My dad's worked in cybersecurity for 15 years. He's never had a single violation. But suddenly he's blacklisted, can't get hired anywhere in Seattle. His reputation is destroyed. Emma, I need you to slow down. If what you're saying is true, it is true. The dam finally broke, and tears streamed down her face. My mom has lupus, mister. Sterling. Without Dad's insurance, she can't afford treatment. We've burned through our savings. I watch my father send out resumes every single day and get rejected because of lies in his file. I watch my mom get weaker. I watch our family fall apart because you couldn't be bothered to ask one question before you ruined us. David stood frozen, the weight of her words settling over him like cement. He'd prided himself on building a company that valued innovation and integrity. But somewhere along the way, he'd stopped seeing the people behind the employee ID numbers. How old are you? He asked quietly. 13. Emma straightened her shoulders, defiant despite the tears. Old enough to know right from wrong, old enough to do what nobody else would. And you taught yourself to hack into my system. My dad taught me to code when I was 8. Said it was the future, that I should understand how technology works. A bitter smile crossed her face. After he was fired, I spent every day at the public library, teaching myself advanced programming. Took me 3 months to map your security protocols. Another month to find a way in. David shook his head in disbelief. That's impossible. We have enterprise-level encryption, multi-factor authentication. You have overconfident IT administrators who use predictable password patterns and a CFO who disabled certain security alerts so he could move money without triggering flags. Emma pulled up another screen. Want to see how deep this goes? She showed him the architecture of the fraud. Shell companies with interconnected ownership structures, payments routed through 3 different accounts before disappearing into offshore holdings. Walsh had been building this system for over 2 years, each layer more sophisticated than the last. He got sloppy, though, Emma said, pulling up a series of text messages. Started feeling untouchable. Look at this conversation between Walsh and Carter from 4 months ago. David read the exchange, his hands trembling. Walsh, Martinez situation contained? Carter, completely. Termination finalized. Reference checks will be handled appropriately. Walsh, good. We can't afford any more curious employees. Make sure the team knows what happens to whistleblowers. Carter, message sent. Nobody else will stick their neck out. They used my dad as an example, Emma whispered, to scare everyone else into silence. David pulled out his phone, his mind racing through options. I need to call our legal team, get law enforcement involved. No! Emma grabbed his arm. Walsh's team flagged my intrusion 20 minutes ago. They're tracing it right now. If you make calls, if you alert anyone, he'll know something's wrong. He'll destroy evidence, disappear, and my dad will never be cleared. Then what do you suggest? You have a board meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. Walsh is planning to present quarterly financials that cover up the missing money. He's going to recommend cutting jobs in the Seattle office to reduce costs, including the few people who might still ask questions. Emma's eyes locked onto his. You need to let him think everything's normal. Let him walk into that meeting confident. And then you expose everything at once, with the board and authorities present. David paced to the window, looking out at the Seattle skyline as dawn broke over Elliott Bay. 20 stories below, the city was waking up. People heading to jobs, supporting families, trusting that their employers would treat them fairly. How many other Carlos Martinezes were out there, too afraid to speak up after seeing what happened to him? The security logs, he said suddenly. They'll show you we're here. I routed my access through Walsh's credentials. As far as the system knows, he's been in your office for the past hour. Emma allowed herself a small smile. If anyone looks, it'll appear he was trying to access your personal files. Despite everything, David felt a flicker of admiration. You're either brilliant or reckless. I'm desperate, Mr. Sterling. There's a difference. She pulled a flash drive from her pocket. Everything's on here, but I need your word that you'll use it, that you won't just make this go away quietly to avoid bad press. You don't trust me. You haven't given me a reason to. Not yet. Fair enough. David took the flash drive, his fingers closing around the small device that held the evidence to destroy his CFO and possibly his company's reputation. If I do this, when I do this, it's going to be ugly. Media coverage, investor panic, potential lawsuits. But it'll be the truth, Emma said softly. And my dad will get his life back. Before David could respond, his phone buzzed. A text from Richard Walsh. Need to discuss security matter. Coming up. He's on his way here, David said, his pulse spiking. You need to leave. Now. Emma was already moving, gathering her backpack. Service elevator, end of the hall. I have a key card I cloned from the janitorial staff. Wait. David stopped her at the door. Your mother's medication. What does she need? It doesn't matter right now. Emma, what does she need? She hesitated, pride warring with desperation. Hydroxychloroquine and prednisone. But we can't afford it until... David was already typing on his phone. Dr. Rachel Kim at Swedish Medical Center. She's expecting your mother tomorrow morning. Everything's covered. I don't want charity. It's not charity. It's a down payment on the debt I owe your family. He met her eyes. Now go. I'll handle Walsh. Emma slipped out just as the elevator chimed down the hall. David had 30 seconds to compose himself, to become the CEO who suspected nothing. He closed the files on his computer, straightened his tie, and waited. Richard Walsh entered without knocking, his expensive suit and easy smile the perfect mask for a thief. "Morning, David. Early start today?" "Couldn't sleep, thinking about tomorrow's board meeting." David kept his voice casual. "Your presentation ready?" "Absolutely. Numbers are strong considering market conditions." Walsh moved to the coffee service, pouring himself a cup like he owned the place. "I wanted to discuss some additional cost-cutting measures. The Seattle office has some redundancies we could eliminate." "Which positions?" "Mid-level IT and security mostly. Low-hanging fruit that won't impact core operations. The people who might notice the fraud," David thought. "The ones who might ask questions. If you're still watching up to now, type "I'm still here" in the comment section and tell us your view. "Let's discuss it at the board meeting," David said, forcing himself to sound neutral. "Give everyone the full picture." Walsh's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Of course. By the way, IT flagged some unusual system access this morning. Routine. Security sweep showed someone was in the executive files around 6 a.m. David's heart rate spiked, but he kept his expression blank. "This morning? I've been here since 5:30 reviewing reports. Probably just logged my own activity." "That's what I figured." Walsh set down his coffee cup, watching David carefully. "Still, protocol requires I mention it. Can't be too careful with data security these days." The irony wasn't lost on David. "No, we certainly can't." After Walsh left, David sat alone in his office, the flash drive burning a hole in his pocket. He pulled out his phone and made 3 calls. The first was to Agent Sarah Chen at the FBI's Seattle field office, a contact from a fraud case 3 years ago. The second was to the Sterling Digital Board Chair, Margaret Patterson, requesting an urgent private meeting before tomorrow's session. The third was to the best employment attorney in Washington state. By noon, he was sitting across from Agent Chen in a nondescript coffee shop in Capitol Hill, far from downtown and prying eyes. "This is substantial," Chen said, reviewing the files on her laptop. "But I need to verify a chain of custody. How did you obtain this evidence?" David had anticipated the question. "An anonymous source provided it. I verified the data against our systems independently." "David, if this goes to prosecution, we need to know." "The source is a minor who feared for her family's safety," he interrupted. "She came to me because every official channel failed. Can we protect her?" Chen studied him for a long moment. "If she cooperates and testifies about what she witnessed regarding her father's case, we can offer immunity. But she broke federal computer fraud laws. She's 13 years old, and she was trying to save her father from being destroyed by my CFO's conspiracy. You want Walsh and Carter? Give me your word she stays out of this." "I'll need to meet with her and her father." David texted Emma, "Can you and your dad meet someone tomorrow morning? Someone who can help." The response came quickly. "Dad doesn't know what I did. He'll be furious. He'll be proud," David typed back. "Trust me." That evening, David drove across town to Rainier Valley, to an apartment building that had seen better decades. The contrast to his penthouse in Queen Anne couldn't have been starker. He climbed 3 flights of stairs, the fluorescent lighting flickering overhead, and knocked on apartment 3C. Carlos Martinez answered the door, wariness etched into his face. He was younger than David expected, maybe late 30s, with the exhausted eyes of a man who'd stopped sleeping well months ago. "Mr. Sterling?" Carlos's confusion was evident. "I don't understand." "I know what happened to you. David said quietly. I know about Walsh, about Carter, about all of it. And I'm here to apologize. Carlos stepped back, letting David enter the small apartment. A woman sat on the couch, Patricia, Martinez, Emma's mother. She was thin, clearly unwell, but her eyes were sharp and protective. Emma stood beside her, her expression a mixture of fear and defiance. Emma, what did you do? Carlos's voice was strained. What you couldn't, she said quietly. What you wouldn't let yourself do. She broke into my office this morning, David said. Showed me everything. The fraud, the cover-up, the conspiracy to silence you. Carlos closed his eyes, his jaw working. Emma, do you understand what you've done? The laws you've broken? I understand that they destroyed you with lies, and nobody cared. Emma's voice rose. I understand that Mom can barely get out of bed, and we can't afford her medicine. I understand that you sit at that computer every day, trying to find work, and nobody will hire you because of what they did. That doesn't justify. She saved my company, David interrupted, and she's going to help me make this right. But I need your cooperation, Carlos. Both of you. Over the next hour, David laid out everything. The FBI involvement, the plan for tomorrow's board meeting, the evidence Emma had compiled. He watched Carlos cycle through anger, fear, and finally cautious hope. Why should I trust you? Carlos asked. You signed my termination without even asking for my side of the story. You shouldn't trust me. I don't deserve it. David met his gaze directly. I was so focused on expansion, on investor meetings, on being everywhere except where I needed to be. In my own company, knowing my own people. I enabled this through negligence. Diane Carter handed me a file, and I signed it without question because I was rushing to catch a flight to Tokyo. Do you know what that signature cost us? Patricia spoke for the first time, her voice weak but fierce. Carlos built his career on integrity. 15 years, never a single violation. One signature from you and suddenly he's unhireable. Every interview ends the same way. They check references, see the termination, and we never hear back. I know, and I can't undo it with words. David pulled out an envelope. Sterling Digital is reinstating you immediately, Carlos. Director of Cybersecurity, a promotion, not just your old position. Full back pay for 6 months. Benefits restored retroactively. I've already arranged for Patricia's medical care to resume. Carlos stared at the offer letter, his hands shaking. This doesn't fix the reputation damage. No, it doesn't. That's why tomorrow, when Walsh is arrested in front of the board, I'm issuing a public statement. Full transparency about the fraud, the conspiracy, and how you were targeted for trying to stop it. Every company that rejected you will know the truth. Emma moved to her father's side, taking his hand. Dad, he's trying to help. He should have helped 6 months ago, Carlos said bitterly, but David could see the walls beginning to crack. You're right, David acknowledged. I should have. I failed you, and I failed every employee who trusted me to run this company with integrity. All I can do now is try to make it right. Patricia reached for her husband's other hand. Carlos, we're about to lose this apartment. I need treatment. Emma needs stability. I need to think about this, Carlos said finally, his voice heavy with the weight of 6 months' worth of pain and humiliation. I need to know this isn't just about covering yourself. Fair enough. David stood to leave, then paused at the door. For what it's worth, your daughter has more courage at 13 than most adults show in a lifetime. She risked everything to fight for you. That kind of love doesn't come from nowhere. You raised an extraordinary person, Carlos. After he left, David sat in his car for a long moment, staring at the modest apartment building. Somewhere in his climb to success, he'd forgotten what really mattered. Emma had reminded him in the most uncomfortable way possible. The next morning, Sterling Digital's boardroom filled with shareholders and executives. Richard Walsh sat at the head of the table, his presentation queued up, completely unaware that FBI agents were positioned just outside. David took his seat, his heart pounding but his resolve steady. "Before we begin with the quarterly financials," David announced, "I need to address a serious matter that's come to my attention." Walsh's expression flickered, just a microsecond of concern before his smile returned. "David, perhaps we should stick to the agenda. The agenda needs to change." David nodded to Margaret Patterson, who opened the boardroom doors. Agent Chen entered, flanked by 2 other agents. The room erupted in confused murmurs. "Richard Walsh, you're under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy." Chen's voice was professional, detached. "Diane Carter has already been taken into custody." Walsh's face went white, then red. "This is absurd. David, what the hell are you doing?" "My job. Finally." David pulled up the evidence files on the main screen. "For the past 18 months, Mr. Walsh has been systematically stealing from this company through fabricated vendor accounts. The total exceeds $2.3 million. The board members leaned forward, studying the documents, the shell companies, the payment trails, the forged authorizations. Walsh's carefully constructed facade crumbled as the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. "You don't understand," Walsh said desperately as agents led him toward the door. "I built the financial systems for this company. I made you profitable." "You made yourself rich," David corrected. "And when someone tried to stop you, you destroyed his career to cover your tracks." As Walsh was escorted out, David addressed the stunned board. 6 months ago, one of our cybersecurity specialists, Carlos Martinez, discovered the fraud and reported it through proper channels. Instead of being protected, he was framed and terminated. I signed that termination without investigation, without question. That failure is on me. He spent the next hour laying out everything: the conspiracy, the cover-up, his own culpability through negligence. The board's reactions ranged from shock to anger, to concern about legal exposure. "We're implementing immediate reforms," David continued. "Independent financial audits, new HR leadership, whistleblower protections with external oversight, and most importantly, I'm instituting weekly open sessions where any employee can bring concerns directly to me. No intermediaries, no gatekeepers." "David," Margaret said carefully, "the media is going to have a field day with this." "Let them. Transparency is the only way forward." He met each board member's eyes. "We can weather negative press. We can't weather becoming the kind of company that punishes integrity and rewards corruption." That afternoon, David returned to Rainier Valley. This time, Carlos opened the door with less wariness and more cautious acceptance. "It's done," David said simply. "Walsh is in custody. The FBI has enough evidence for multiple felony charges. And I've already issued a press release clearing your name, explaining exactly what happened." Carlos's shoulders sagged with relief he'd been holding back for months. "Emma showed me the news. My phone hasn't stopped ringing. Former colleagues apologizing, companies asking if I'm available for interviews." "You're not available. You work for me now." David smiled slightly. "That is, if you're still willing." I need one thing first, Carlos said. I need to know that if I see something wrong again, I won't be silenced. That Emma won't have to break laws to be heard. You have my word. And more than that, you have it in writing, in new company policy, with external oversight. I'm making sure no CEO after me can make my mistakes. Over the following weeks, Sterling Digital transformed. The story made national news. The young girl who hacked a corporation to save her father became a symbol of courage against corruption. Carlos returned to work, not as a cautious employee, but as a respected leader rebuilding the security infrastructure. Patricia's health improved with proper treatment. And Emma, after a long conversation with Agent Chen and her parents, received immunity in exchange for testimony and a promise to use her skills legally going forward. 6 months later, David stood in the same office where this had all begun, watching Emma teach a coding workshop in the conference room below. She'd been invited as a special guest for the company's new youth technology program, completely legal this time, with proper authorization and her parents' blessing. Carlos joined him at the window. She's getting scholarship offers from MIT, Stanford, Carnegie Mellon. Apparently, ethical hacking is quite the resume builder when you're 13. She earned it, David said. How's Patricia? Good. Days and bad days, but more good lately. Having insurance again makes all the difference. Carlos paused. You know, I hated you for a long time. Part of me still struggles with it. I don't blame you. But I also see you trying. Really trying. The open office hours, the new policies, the way you actually know employees' names now. Carlos managed a slight smile. It's not redemption. Not yet. But it's a start. That's all I can ask for. In a world of corporate towers and bottom lines, sometimes it takes the smallest voice to remind us what really matters. Emma Martinez didn't just save a company that day. She reminded everyone that courage doesn't require authority and integrity doesn't require permission. Sometimes all it takes is someone brave enough to fight for what's right, and someone humble enough to listen. What do you have to say? David watched Emma below, surrounded by other kids eager to learn, her father standing proudly nearby. He'd built Sterling Digital to change the technology industry, but a 13-year-old girl had changed him instead. She'd shown him that real leadership wasn't about corner offices or stock prices. It was about the courage to face uncomfortable truths and the integrity to act on them, no matter the cost. Thank you, David said quietly. Knowing Carlos would understand, he meant it for the entire Martinez family. Just don't make me send Emma to hack you again, Carlos replied. And for the first time in their relationship, they both laughed.